let's go ahead and get started. We're a little behind here, so we got to get going. Secondly, I have good news for all of you.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to hand out a piece of paper with the test questions on. They'll be on Teams. There'll be 2 questions. You choose. But we got an email saying that Teams was acting up and might not work and they might have to reboot it. So I quick posted it. So now the questions are on today. So on Teams, the 2 questions are there. Everybody quick check if you have your phone, make sure you have the questions, and then we'll get to your notes. Just quick check. Make sure it's working because Teams is all messed up and I don't know if it, I do it for one of my classes and have it transferred all 4. I don't know if it works, so I'm checking each class to make sure you get the questions. So you notice I have everything I posted up there, I have thesis statements, I have stuff like that. Yeah, you're a little far back. It should say SHS 2025.
Analyze the impact of the industrial revolution.
That's it, you got it. You pick 3 of those questions and write 4 essays on Tuesday. All right, so, wait.
Oh, there you go, found it.
Why is it copy?
Once in time, so.
I'm fine.
Do this. This is the same.
Pick 1 of the 2. All right, here we go. I got a better idea.
But.
That's it. We just put you in the randomizer and you pick you get whatever question you get. That'd be so much more exciting.
Yeah.
I'm there. Randomizer.
Next one, next essay test.
We need a better randomizer. Will you please ask?
Yeah.
Oh, Tom.
You can't be saying where you are.
You got your. All right. Where was the first women's rights convention? Yeah, Seneca Falls. And I gave you 3 leaders. Who were the 2 most important leaders of that conference in 1840? Who's one?
Her name was, never mind.
Lucretia Mott's one. Who's the other? Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Who was her protege who would be there for the rest of the century? Very good. And what was their big issue? A better way. What were they called because they want the right to vote? What was the name given from Britain? That's suffragettes. And let's see, we got Christmas, we got family. Oh, what famous Christmas character came out of the Industrial Revolution? Exactly. And what? Liar. No, Rudolph came out of that too. Rudolph wasn't this ancient Greek.
He's blind to this guy.
It came out of the cartoon. I always lie. Yes, I always lie. No, now I don't lie. Moving on. Moving on. Now, what else did we do yesterday? We did stuff. Oh, what was the great religious upheaval? The great religious upheaval because of the Industrial Revolution. The Second Great Awakening. That Second Great Awakening. And basically, it said, ignore the material world for the what world? Yeah, spiritual. Because what's that? What they called it at that time. Still, people call it that today, but call this today, but what was that term for when they believe the end is near? Judgment, the rapture, or there's another name. Yeah, millennialism. Very good. Now, later on, the term for the millennialism will become the rapture. I use that to give you a kind of term that's more common today. And so we didn't get to this. Yeah, millennialism.
We got a burnover district. New York.
Oh, burnover district in New York. And then we did thesis state, right?
Yeah.
So there are some more, I put them in quotes. We have all these, they're very Protestant, and they have elements of other more dominant sects of Protestant Christianity, but they were more, I just put them on the fringe. I put it in quotes by not saying, not denigrating or not. You have these fringe groups that come in, some would become mainstream, some would disappear. For example, the Shakers would become actually not huge, but a very well-known, influential group that believed in almost complete conversion or believed in salvation, or we'd say born again at the end of the century. And they would go into this kind, when they would convert, into this ecstasy where they would shake and literally fall off their chairs and go into convulsions to show that they had seen the light. And as part of their conversion was a close relationship with God, and therefore they would get married. That is a Shaker marriage ritual. I don't know what they're doing, but they did not believe in marital relations. They were all celibate, with the idea being that that took you away from your relationship with God, which is really, has a little bit of relationship to early Christianity, but very tangential, but not very much. But you can guess what's going to happen to the Shakers by the early 20th century. They're gone. If you don't understand why, once again, ask your parents, it's about a stork. Moving on. The Millerites was another one. They were millennialists who believed the end is coming. Mark 8, 1844. The end is going to be there. And everybody who believed is going to be brought up to heaven. And they had a real debate. If you're going to be brought up to the heaven that early morning on March 8th, how would this happen? And so they decided to be sure that you would not get caught on this roof, the ceiling of your house. They would go on the roof. This is cartoon kind of mocking them. And they wore bedclothes because they're worried, what do you wear when you go up to heaven? So then would you be stripped naked? I mean, it's a real issue. So they would go onto the roof and wait for the end and judgment day, and they would be brought up. And everybody on earth would go into a fiery battle, good versus evil, called Armageddon. Needless to say, it didn't happen. And thus, here they are being mocked for not going. And so known for going out of roof and waiting. And they called it the Great Disappointment. The Millers, they were so sad that they didn't go up to heaven and watch everybody else die in a fiery hell. I just find that fascinating. Yes, we believe in so many Christian ideals like watching our neighbors die in a fiery hell. But I'm fascinated by this. And they tried to, once you predict the end of the world and it doesn't happen, you lose a little credibility. They said, hey, we misread the Bible. Tried 2 more dates, didn't work, and the Millerites would finally kind of dissolve. Long would become very close to what's called the Adventists. Matthias, we're not going to get to that. That's another cult. There's a bunch of them. Some would start out on these sects that would be called cults all the time, that would become much more mainstream. Much more. For example, the Church of Latter-day Saints, Mormons, they were considered to be not only, they were considered to be not Christian. They were considered to be not Christian by many Christians at this time. That's part of the reason why they were run out of New York, Missouri, Illinois, and eventually to Utah, but also the Seventh-day Adventists, which is very fascinating now because they are significant, or both significant religions. Mormonism, one of the fastest growing religions, of sects of Christianity in the world, and considered very mainstream Christian. But here are 2 attacking Mormons as fringe groups here, going to Utah, which is leaving the U.S., but this one's attacking plural marriage. We will come back to plural marriage. We will come back to this. I'll talk a little bit more about Mormons, but I do a little bit of manifest destiny because that is a little bit westward. I think that because of more time with the West, we live in Montana, and why they came to Utah, so we'll come back to it. Because it's an interesting story about going to Utah, getting the heck out of the United States, and then the U.S. got them again. So, not only that, you have this weird kind of secularization of religion. It's very weird, but they try to give kind of a religious foundation to the United States out of the Second Great Awakening. This picture drawn right after the Civil War. And it's a very creepy thing of Washington, who was kind of a deist, bringing Lincoln up to heaven to be greeted by angels. And so they're basically taking the religion that came out of the Second Great Awakening and saying that's the way it was in 1776. And the founding and trying to tie it together. And Lincoln, even though it was very spiritual, was also kind of on the fringe of this. It's very interesting how people try to use their own personal views and try to relate it back to history. And I also thought the picture was both a combination of creepy and funny. So, and since I saw it and couldn't unsee it, now you can't either. Another reaction, and it's similar to the liberal churches, it's similar to the Second Great Awakening, it's called Transcendentalism. And it's similar to what's called Romanticism in Europe. And it emphasizes the power of the individual. When I say Romanticism, some of you have heard of that, know what that is. It's an idea. And there's a lot of art at this time talking about somebody getting above the fray, transcend the fray. So here's the fray, the fog of civilization and on a mountain. A lot of painting of this. Romantic art is a really interesting style of art. Right before your canvas. So that last little bit of the old or the style, but you can see the change coming. And so the roots of Transcendentalism goes to Ralph Waldo Emerson in the United States, middle class. And he looked at the world and he feared what capitalism was doing. He feared that new technology they dubbed empiricism. I mentioned that once before. I put technology to remind me to emphasize that again. He feared it as he saw it. We're being dictated by money and science and no longer feelings. Don't forget the Second Great Awakening was very emotional and feeling centered too. And we'll get above this. But also, he didn't like capitalism, everything for sale. And people were money grubbing, do whatever for profit, to try to capture a market, whatever to make a buck. And he looked at that and just, like, just these people are evil, they're too greedy, and I want to get away from it, to move beyond. A very similar thing was happening all across Europe called romantic. And this is romantic, don't think in terms of romantic love. Think of it more like that nostalgia, which we kind of talk about with the Second Great Awakening, but this is a different way to react to it. Looking back to the way it should have been. And that's a kind of conservative. And so you have a conservative element, even though they weren't all necessarily conservatives in other ways. Nobody is one or the other. So you can get a lot of this weird looking back to before all this science happened, before this new market of capitalism, to look back where life was still a mystery and it was on our own wits and we wouldn't have to know everything, we could just be. So this is supposed to be the Hudson River. But on the Hudson River, we have a Roman aqueduct and a medieval castle. Looking back, there'll be a lot of old ruins and paintings, or kind of this isolated individual getting beyond everybody else. I like romantic art. And so we're going to transcend this world and go back to something more natural. Not where everything's numbered or money based. But let's be clear about it. Let's say you want to get above this and you're not going to be worried about capitalism, money, and getting profit. What do you got to have? What do you have to think this way? You better have money. This is not, if you don't have money, you've got to do it. In fact, it's kind of insulting to you. If I have to go work for a living, you're telling me, oh, don't do that. How dare you be involved with money grubbing? You just greed. Wait a second, I got to live. It's very elitist. This is an elitist attitude. So the Second Great Awakening was appealing to a regular folk. This is for a small middle class group. And it's going to be where life was more established. It's very New England. Very New England. It has a connection, therefore, to those liberal churches. So, a lot of this art and fear of what's happening. Now, this is a British artist, but had great influence on American art. One of my favorite artists, Joseph Turner. You don't need to know the name. I just like this painting so much. It's one of my favorite paintings, but it really fits in that fear that the Transcendentalists had so well. So you can see in the background a Roman arch bridge. See it right here? And an old, like a rowboat. Calm. But look at the storm coming. The storm is coming that's going to overtake and cover everything and change everything. Remember I told you how capitalism and that wage system seemed like there was something coming. A change we didn't know. And what's bringing it? A monster. It's a monster. But what is it? It's training. And it's that fear, this new technology, because what it will bring. And look at it closer up. It kind of has a face, but doesn't. It's sort of human, but it's not human. It's made by humans, works for humans, but is it really human and will eventually take over? No coincidence that this philosophy will lead to some of the first world great works of what would become known as science fiction. For example, Frankenstein. It's very much a romantic transcendental style work. And Dracula at the end of the century. And what's coming is, I mentioned science fiction. Science fiction will get its name in 1930, the 1930s, but it will start in this era. And it's almost so much of it is fear of the future. So fear of technology. It's a great painting. Flat pictures on a screen do not do it justice. I know. Should we go to London and take a look at it? To the Tate Museum? Should we go? London is really cool, but it is filled with Brits, just so you know. Just so you know. Okay, the American art of Transcendentalism or Romantic down the Hudson River School. The Hudson River School. Frederick Church is probably the best known. He literally had his studio, this beautiful mansion that's now a national park, right on the Hudson. And for example, this would make him famous. In the same vein, how nature, we can think we can conquer nature with our new machines, but nature is unstoppable. If I know what waterfall that is, New York, that's Niagara Falls. One of the most famous pieces of art. It's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City now. And just nature is unstoppable. Oh, you think you can conquer nature, but nature is powerful. You think you could crack all the codes of nature with your science? Nope. And here's another one showing he was really obsessed with like rainforests and the wilds of South America and the Andes. Here, lots of lone outcroppings of ice in the Arctic. One lone ship, old sailing vessel, stuck on knowledge. What will survive? So that's the Hudson River School. Lots of pictures too of the American West and romanticizing that by making it this kind of this dream area, even though they'd never been to the West. And so the most famous of the Transcendentalists is Henry David Thoreau. He would write an essay called On Civil Disobedience. If anyone's taking it, it's AP Lang, right? For you guys, AP Lang. That's the AP class for juniors. Is anyone in that class now? You will read this. That's one of the things we'll have to read. And in it, he lays out this idea that just people should disobey unjust laws. And after he wrote it, he would say, what is the unjust law that I'm saying we should disobey? The Mexican War. And that's why I put down with the Mexican War. He's down, he's opposed. That's what I mean by this. I ran out of space, so I used arrows. He'd have great influence on various things, most famously Gandhi and the nonviolent civil disobedience of the American Civil Rights Movement that we associate with Martin Luther King, even though it's obviously many different people, MLK. And he believed going back to nature. Now, Thoreau wanted to make his protest of the unjust law against a war of conquest, the Mexican-American War, which, as he saw it, was to expand land for slavery, which he was right. But in reality, Henry David Thoreau just thought people in government were dumb and he was smarter than everybody else, so he shouldn't pay taxes. Then later on gave it a more noble attack. Thoreau was an interesting guy. He would just go kind of mooch off with friends. He would show up and ask to stay at Emerson's house for a day and end up staying for a year. Thoreau was an interesting guy. And he would go live off of nature and imply that he was living with none or just on his own, just off of nature, did not need society in that evil market. But then he would go and demand food from his friends. And he had a pretty cool reason. Thoreau's an interesting guy. Next, the temperance movement, which is also tied in to the Second Great Awakening, comes out of this. Temperance is to be tempered in behavior, meaning, try to come back on alcohol. What is it called? Not temperance, but you say, oh, we should get rid of alcohol completely. What? Say it again. Abolition for anti-slavery, but you're very close. Prohibition. It's an ambition. You're on the right track. It's a nation. So, part of it was religious. Now, this goes against most of the time of Christianity. Throughout the Bible, there's drinking. Throughout the Bible. But then in the Second Great Awakening, drinking was hurting your relationship with God. So you're going to get some of these religious groups are more temperate. Some are going to have a complete prohibition of alcohol. And so you see have religious, but also we talked about this with the family. One wage or consumers that takes away from the family. This is a cartoon from the end of the century, or a poster. You can read that, and I like drink on the hand coming in, taking the food off the child's table. Subtle, isn't it? A disembodied hand will take your food. But the temperate movement will also be funded by people. Who benefits from this? Those who are employers, the new capitalists. Why? You don't want hungover workers. It was the norm to drink all day Sunday for working people, not work Monday. And drinking dropped dramatically, by well over 50% by 1850, and probably people drank about 1/10 as much on average by the end of the century. The difference was when they drank, it was binge drinking. So both you're taking, doing a drug, but one is even more dangerous. But anyways, temperance. And this would fit in with an ideal being pushed upon people. Used to be called almost forgot something. Carrie Nation. She would become one of the leaders of the prohibition, or the temperance and then the prohibition movement at the end of the century. So she got her start before. It's called the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and she was known for bringing her hatchet into bars and taking it to the bar. Yeah. And yeah, she became famous. Montana, as you can imagine, early Montana, there was a bar. There were many bars on every corner. 4 bars on every corner in early Montana. But the temperance league became very, very potent. And by the end of the century, you have people signing a pledge, like this is in Maine, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, to abstain from distilled, fermented, or malt liquor. And you see the other picture? Montana, that's the Episcopal Church right by Women's Park in Ellen. And Montana would ban alcohol before the 18th Amendment was ratified. Which, if you know, like I said, about the history of Montana, it's kind of crazy how Montana went from being bars everywhere to. So we'll get to prohibition, but it all kind of starts here. Next, that's going to lead to, start with the Puritan work ethic, but it's become known as the Protestant work ethic. And I got to be very careful about, or to say this, Protestant Christian. So it's implying, first off, that people who are not Protestant Christians don't do this. But it's going to be pushed upon people more and more as part of the Second Great Awakening. And I would say every single one of these is a moral. This is a value. This is a goal. First one is hard work. Hard work for the sake of hard work. Not for a wage or salary, but hard work for salvation. Hard work. And we should add, hard work is, I would say, a virtue. And so taking pride in your work is very important. And not taking pride in your work means leaves you empty and unfulfilled. Trust me, no matter what your job is, if you do a half-ass job, you'll get out of it. It's true. But someone might benefit you working hard and not complaining about a wage, let's say. Also, 2 more, punctuality and temperance. Be there on time. This is from the famous 1920s silent movie called Metropolis, one of the great sci-fi movies of the early motion picture. People lined up to go punch in. It's kind of a dystopian world where you have a few rich and everybody just workers for them. And here are Women's Christian Temperance Union outside of a bar for temperance. Once again, punctuality. Not only is punctuality a virtue, hey, you say you're going to be somewhere, you should be there. And it's shocking. You come in late for something, you have disrupted everybody else and what they're doing. That's because you just don't care and you just care about yourself and you're rude. I'm sorry, but that's what it is. And yes, I've been late and I know I'm rude by that. Being inconsiderate and dishonest because I'm saying I'm going to be there and I wasn't there. It is a virtue, but might somebody benefit from you being punctual? Same thing with temperance, as we said before, might someone benefit? And workers didn't like this because if this is pushed upon workers, this is implying that they're immoral. They're not working hard. If you don't work hard, regardless of a wage, you're going to hell. They don't like this. What do you mean I don't work hard? And what about Catholics who are not Protestant? Doesn't this imply that they don't work hard? That they don't show up on time? That they are unreliable? Which I would consider to be like one of the worst things I could be called. Is unreliable. Then I live in total fear of being called unreliable. And you're drunkards if you're Catholic. Heck, you can't trust Catholics because they only care about what the Pope says. The anti-Catholic bias is going to be so huge, it's unbelievable. People would say what I just said all the time. Of course, it's patently ridiculous, but they're going to say it, but find a way to attack them. And so this is a way to say, workers, oh yeah, you're not really working. If you don't follow this, you're immoral. And we need to have some hammer to make you work hard. What is the hammer? You don't work hard, you're going to hell. And Catholics clearly cannot. So we'll get to more anti-Catholic bias. There's only been 2 Catholic presidents of the United States. Al Smith, one of the reasons he was not elected in 1928, there are many reasons, but one was he was a papist, meaning pro-pope. He's Catholic. Who are 2 Catholic presidents? Anyone know? John Kennedy was one, and it was an issue, but not as much. Do I know the other? Joe Biden. 2, both are descendants of mostly Irish immigrants. So, another factor, urbanization. We've talked about this before, so I don't need to go into detail about this, but that's where the factories were. So look at 1820, there's only a few towns, the population was mostly rural, almost 80% of the population agricultural. There's only one city over 100,000, and that's Manhattan, New York. That's it. There's also a little tiny Brooklyn, a little place called the Bronx, etc. There's separate towns. Heck, there's only one town of any size in the South, and that's New Orleans, and that was a brand new city after the Louisiana Purchase. Look at 1860. I don't know why this happens. I don't know what I did, but it's kind of cool. Like that? It's Halloweenish. Orange and black, huh? So look what happened by 1860. You have cities exploding. Okay, New York City was actually not one, it was divided up into many cities. Manhattan Island was New York. Brooklyn was a separate city to the 1880s. Now it's part of New York City. And that city was huge, almost 500,000 people. New York was about 750,000 people. Chicago in 1820 had less than about 5,000. Now it's almost 200,000. It would be well over 1 million by the end of the century. Chicago will explode in population. But look where the main centers of population are. And here. And when I put down overcrowding, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to rents? Explode. How about housing costs? 10% of the population in New York City by 1900 did not have a home. They were unhoused. They lived on streets. Wages were relatively low and stagnant. And so all it takes is you either not having money, can't get a job, or for most people today, as in then, you lose your job 1 month without pay, you probably lose your home. It's a scary world. This is a new world. So, massive overcrowding. And that leads to another big change, occupation change. You're going to get a much more diversified workforce. And especially a more commercial, urban workforce, that's where the jobs are. Think about more away from farming and more into educated jobs, professional jobs like clerks, or a significant number of professional middle-class jobs like clerks or education, teachers, middle-class job, or for that matter, engineers or factory workers, which are relatively unskilled, and construction is going to explode. Now, this is a very generic table. I found one that was a little more complex, but it was too much information, too much data. But the big thing is this. Look at agriculture, 1820, 1860. Everybody's expectation of how they'll make a living is will change. And when it says 53% here, it's less than 40% of the North were agricultural. And it's going to be less than 10% of the North by the end of the century. Hey, what percentage of people make their sole living off agriculture today? About 0.4%. Montana, which is supposed to be an agricultural state, it's about 1.5%. Yeah, it's just totally different world. Totally different world. So, another one, and put a big star by this. Another reaction was new immigration. Another reaction, because a wave of immigrants, before 1820 or so, most of the immigrants came from Britain itself. And relatively similar cultures, mostly Protestant, similar diet, language, etc. After 1830, you're going to see a vastly different population. Beginning about 1830, a bunch from what is now southern Germany. There was no Germany then. So we're talking about kingdoms like Baden-Baden, Bavaria. They were separate kingdoms. And they came because of industrialization. You have farmers and laborers losing their job because industrialization began to happen in Britain. And what happened? They kind of kicked them out. They didn't want a vast number of people unemployed who might rebel. Send them to America. So they're poor. They speak a language. Culturally different, a lot different diet, different religion. And look at the wave of immigration that first. This represents that first big wave of industrialization, and something else happened. And they would begin to die down, go up again in the second big wave. But religion are the majority of people suffering today or then. You should probably know, because I've mentioned it. They're Catholic. So not only do they speak a different language, not only a different diet, different cultural norms, Catholic. And as we all know, Catholics are only loyal to the Pope, right? Anybody here Catholic? You know, if the Pope, you have a little, put you on the phone, you have a little action, the Pope says something, you should jump. Of course that isn't true, but what a way to attack. And heck, people have anti-Catholic vibe. Remember that anti-Catholic vibe? Remember back when I told you about how the Quebec Act and the British took all this territory from the French and we're going to give it back and what's called this Catholic. And it freaked out the patriots. But of course that wasn't true. Anti-Catholic bias is old. Speaking of Catholic immigrants, what little thing happened to the food supply all over the world in the 1840s? Specifically, what crop? Potatoes. And what island? Well, now it's a country, but then it was brutally held by Great Britain. What island nation would be most hit by this? The Irish. The potato blight was worldwide. And that famine crushed Ireland. Why? Why the Irish? Oh, there's a lot of good land in Ireland. And they were growing huge crops all through the 1840s. I didn't put down the date, down 1840s. Huge crops in Ireland of mostly wheat, but also oats, other grains, and maize. Massive crops. But who owned? What kind of people own the majority of land? Who? Yeah, they're all English. From Britain, but they're all English. And where was all this food going? Back to Britain, back to England. And so you have all this food in front of starving millions of Ireland. Now, why potatoes then? All you need is a tiny little patch of dirt to grow a potato. So they just grew potatoes wherever they could grow potatoes. And 95% of the diet of the average Irish person was potatoes because the English had taken all their land. And they lived in absolute abject poverty. And then all of a sudden, the potato famine hit. Now, it's not just Ireland. This is worldwide. The fungus went all around the world. What happened to food prices all around the world if you have a potato famine? If one source of food disappears, that means all the other food will open up. It's no coincidence that 1848 would be the year of revolutions. This potato famine that was, we don't know where it started, worldwide, would not only lead to revolutions across Europe, it would lead to revolutions in Africa, it would lead to a rebellion in China 15 years after this era that would lead to the death of almost 50 million people called the Taiping Rebellion. This was a huge catastrophe. And the worst part is this. You plant a potato, they're all clones. Remember, you just like seed potatoes, you cut off with the seedage, you drop in the ground. I mentioned this before. How do you know? When do you know? And how do you know? If blight has hit that potato. When you harvest, you gotta wait till the fall. So this nice green flowing leaf, this is this pretty little green plant will grow. You have no idea until you dig it up. And here they're digging up just a few potatoes. Starvation. So you don't know and it's too late and you have no money. So the population will just stall. And here, people starving, can't work. And then of course, here is the English landlord kicking the Irish out of their house. There's a reason the Irish hate the British. There is a reason that if you wear orange on St. Patrick's Day and you're in certain areas, you will be roughed up. The orange represented the English colonizers to Ireland. And if you wear that on St. Patrick's Day in my classroom, you will be in the stocks. And if it's more than one, we'll make you fit. Yes, that will be unacceptable. Pink close enough to red, which is close enough to orange. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. Look at that. Unacceptable. Who else is unacceptable? Red. Unacceptable. Davey did nothing to stop it. You're unacceptable too. Me. Yeah, I need to ring it. Now the problem is my name is English, but I've thrown my lot in with the Irish and the Welsh. How about that? Moving on. So look at the population declines. All the areas in dark, that is areas of Ireland that lost over 30 to 50, sometimes 80% of the population. The only area that grew in population was Dublin, the major city, and that's because people went there desperate and lived on the streets. And where did they go? What happened to them? Starved to death. Many went to Britain, immigrate there, or went to the United States. Here, Harper's Magazine for the United States implying Irish poor, help going to the US. That's seen as a good thing, but not everyone saw this as good. Catholic immigrants, more coming in. Are they really loyal to the US? Are they real Americans? Religion. And a new movement will come out of this. But there's something else too. Oh, here I like ancestry by congressional district. It's a little bit old, not Montana's too. Montana has a pretty big Irish population. But what city has the greatest Irish descent? Of course, right? No one knows this town. It's Butte. I will tell you my story when we get to a little bit later on about a tour I took in Dublin and its relationship to Irish immigrants and Butte in Montana and Helena. It was a pretty amazing walking tour. What's going to come out of this? Nativists. Nativists are anti-immigrant. They do not want immigration. And they believe in this native population of Americans. Native, so everyone got that? They're anti-immigrants. So it says right here, Native Americans, beware of foreign influence. You see what's weird about that flag? I have no idea why they put the ends backwards. I know, not for Native American, not for Native, but anyone in the sentence, or in the word. I guess they wanted people that, wanted to catch their eye. Think about this for a second. So they want Native Americans. They're not talking about American Indians. They're not talking about the woodland nations. They're talking about people who came from other places to the United States or the United States to the colonies. they're talking about immigrants too. So we're the real Americans, but not you new immigrants. And people in the United States did not call themselves Americans, really, until after the Battle of Tippecanoe and the War of 1812. And 20 years later, we're the real Americans. We're the real Americans. And they said they're not real Americans. They're culturally different. They speak different, they act different, they drink different, their food is different, their food is disgusting, they would argue. Wait till all the attacks on Italian food. It's going to be amazing in the 1880s, which blows me away because that's like one of my favorite food. Yeah, they call them garlic eaters. Can you imagine how dull your food would be without things like garlic? But they're not real Americans. And another thing they add this to it. They're not real Americans. In fact, they're either immoral poor people, and that's why they're starving to death in Ireland, because they're immoral, or they're criminals. Here's the poorhouse from Galway. Galway is a little town in Northern Ireland. Known for its Irish music. I guess music. If you live in Ireland, that's kind of redundant, but they're criminals. They're setting their criminal element. And that's going to begin a thing for nativists. Nativists will say the immigrants are a bunch of criminals. They're coming over to rob the United States. And so that will be used in the 1840s, 1880s, 1920s. You see it again in the 1990s. What if people say that today? Which is interesting because immigrants actually commit significantly fewer crimes than natural-born Americans. But if you're going to be a nativist, it doesn't matter. But also they're a bunch of drunkards. Here, this is really important. Different culture, and they apply it because they're drinking Irish whiskey, and so they're a drunken Irishman. What's the game? They play with a stick, Irish game. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. Say it again.
Okay, or something.
No, it's not that. It's close. That's all. How do I do this? I can't remember. Yeah, yeah. No, it's not croquet. It's got like a little hook to it, and you can hit a ball. So it looks a little like field hockey. It looks like field hockey, but it's not field hockey. Act like I knew the name. It couldn't be as soon as you live. But German immigrant lager beer, God, they're making me mad. Someday you too will be old and have dementia. I am old. Are you? Moving on. Lager beer. That's a German style of brewing that's different than British style. And one more thing. You see it? What does that say right there? Can you read it? They're going to come in and vote. Now, let's be clear about it. There's no rules on citizenship, so every state has something different, but only citizens can vote. But people to this day say that immigrants are coming in and voting, which no, there's no evidence of that, but people do. What I'm trying to say is arguments that nativists use today were used 30 years ago, 60 years before that, et cetera, et cetera. And we talked about what immigrants can do in the short run to jobs, and they're Catholics. What is it? It's gonna make me really mad. Earl? It's a really hard game. It's really hard. It's shocking what those guys can do. It's have stick with a little and that kind of vaguely looks like a option. If I don't think about it, it'll pop in my head. Right? So here's one. Look at the caricature they draw. This will become a very common caricature of an Irishman. You notice it doesn't look human. It almost looks like an ape on rum. And look at this. Protecting from the Irish immigrants. You notice the alligators coming in, these monsters. What do they look like? Does that look familiar? Think Catholic. The Pope, doesn't it? They're papists. And here's another classic one from a satirical magazine called APUSH. Here's an immigrant coming in, and they say, keep out. But this is the shadow of their former self. And what were all of these people one day? Oh, they were all once immigrants. And now they're saying, we got ours with the bountiful with the bounty of the United States. And then we pull up the ladder. And then we pull up the ladder. So, there's going to be a political party that's going to be created because of this. 1850s, and it almost became one of the three parties. So one of the two parties. Remember what winner take all? So we have two parties. They called themselves the American Party, but they were dubbed the Know Nothing. There was a secret group, and they were told of nativists, and they were said, if anybody asked you about the order of the Star Spangled Banner, you were supposed to say, I know nothing. So they started calling themselves the Know Nothing Party, which I think is kind of humorous for a political party, but they almost became one of the third party. By the way, is nativism a more close to conservative or liberal? It's conservative. It's kind of nostalgic. Go back to the old days before the Indians. And let me be clear about it. People can be liberal in something, conservative in another. We're just kind of introducing that. Nobody is one thing in another. It's not like a team where you have to be all this one point of view or another. That's not the way humans are. Nothing is black and white as much as people try to make it black and white, good and evil. But it really divides workers. It really divides workers. Last thing for today. One more big change. Oh, I like this. Natives of the soil arouse instead of arise. Shall American labor be protected? They almost pulled it off in 1856 and became one of the two parties. Right here, put down class conflict. And class conflict are between the haves and the have-nots. Those who are making it, those who do not. Or another way to look at it is jump right to here. The haves, they see the new system as opportunity. The have-nots left out. And this is in New York during the 1890s. There were so many people unhoused that they were renting out spots in the alley. This is one thing about history. We have a real problem with people not having homes right now. And people think this is like a new thing, or they just like no context of history. No. If wages aren't keeping up and there's overcrowding and house values go up, people don't have homes. These are decisions you made. Okay. And on that happy note, I forgot your homework. Or did I give you your homework?
No, yeah. Like, no, we have no study. That's all you.
Oh, no, we got more than that. Time continues to march on. And by the way, don't whine, time moves on. So you have to read 385 to 389 and 405 to 419.
What's that?
By Monday. 385 to 389 and 405 to 419. Hurling, yes, thank you. It's hurling. I had. Thank you for looking that up. Even though I'm embarrassed, I didn't. Okay, it's really. Think about it. They're talented also. Wait a minute, this is not a three-person job, it's a two-person. Okay, well, I'll make sure anybody knows. Get out of here, people. I've had enough. Go to your hurling clubs. Huh? It's really.
I think that might be your one.
It would be such a hard game. Where are you going tomorrow?
I don't know.
Well,
She wants me to go to school.
so you're gonna miss the notes in here in this
Well,
Union.
yeah, what are we doing in special topics? Just
special topics. We're gonna start it today, finish tomorrow, the thing on the world. And I will ask a couple questions, you know, it's a great little video, and I put a copy of it on. There'll be a few questions on that, so no worries. Yes. They didn't look at my grades yet. You know, not everyone got it, and I was going down the list, and I might have accidentally put you in the wrong spot. So let me see if you have it.
Let's get it.
And it might have just been out to get you. Have you thought of that? You should have.
Maybe.
You should have done that. Why don't you have it?
I don't know.
You got the extra.
Sweet.
I think I just accidentally put it in the wrong spot.
And I'm sure the computer,
Everyone's out to get you.
the monopolies,
But actually, that's what monopolies do.
you can't do anything about it.
I was literally just reading about old programmers for Microsoft, and they said when they left in the last year, and they said they told them that Microsoft 10 and Microsoft 11 are full of bugs and not going to work. Like, oh, I'm going to go. So it is monopoly. So it's not me.
Oh.
Microsoft is out to get your. Do you want me to give you the points or just keep you like this?
I would like the points probably.
I'm checking right now. Oh shoot, you don't have it. You should have done that. You got it.
Sweet. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah.
Destroy everything.
Come on, people, let's go.
I might period early. Why would today was New Year's Eve?
Come on, come on.
Well, let's get there because it's not.
Dude, my dog names, I hear.
Oh my God. How did that song get in my head? Oh.
Unless you answer for your, but. Wait.
That's the great. I've got like routine.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the,
I'm
having kind of very great reasons. This one sec. Everybody, let's go ahead. We got through a lot of the Mythbusters. I hope you enjoy the show. I think it's great. And the big thing is, a little bit about what the theory is. If you know. You're sneaky about that.
It's not my fault. I'm told. As soon as the duck like thing goes out.
And something else I was going to tell you. No, I can't remember.
Oh.
Oh, just to review. So they've done a few of the conspiracy theories. Yeah, these are the biggies. There's a bunch of them, like the Van Allen's belt, and a few others. But the belt of radiation. That's outside of the Earth, and that was humans could not survive that. But which ones have they done so far? The vacuum. So we haven't quite gotten to that one yet. Yeah, we haven't quite gotten to that one yet either.
The parallel shadows.
Yeah, parallel shadows. Why did that prove to be? What was the answer? Why there are the shadows are not concrete? And they did another one. What's the other one? Yeah. In the shadows, there's reflection off the moon. I think that's sad. We should do it. And he did it real fast, and it was done. That's all we need to do. Kind of like a Charlie Brown Christmas thing.
Yes, plus some cement and charcoal, yeah.
Oops, I'll provide the charcoal. You make everything else. Do I have? Here we go, Mythbusters. That's really all I got to do. Okay, we're getting to the booth part. The booth. If you want. By the way, if you check on Teams, I've been putting fun Halloween pictures up. I know if you've noticed those. So I had to record the fourth period because I forgot to hit record third period. And guess who didn't bother to hit stop? So I recorded in an empty room and then that's coming in for all lunch. That's gonna be good viewing. I might just clip that part and make that part of it. The empty room. Give me a sec, I gotta get out. Oh.